Hi everyone, my name is Wesley Kwok and I'm a mental performance consultant and member of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association. I'm here working with the Larry Chung Master Academy to bring you guys a multi-module lesson plan working to bring the mental game into your golf curriculum. So this is the first module, which is just going to be an introduction to mental performance, what it is, and why you should be paying attention to it in your golf game. So when we talk about sport and golf particularly, we like to say that there are four pillars of sport performance. The first being something very basic, the physical aspect, right? Are you physically fit? Can you actually perform the movements that you need to perform in your sport? Do you have the correct nutrition? Are you flexible enough? Those kinds of things that you work with in terms of strength and conditioning. The second pillar that we have, which is very prominent in golf, and especially with golf instructors, is the technical aspect. This is where we focus on things like the golf swing. Are you hitting the correct positions? Is your technique good? Is your tempo good? And other things like that. Again, golf being a very unique sport also has a very prominent tactical pillar of sport performance. This is the strategy associated with playing golf, and it includes things like the conditions of the day, the people that you're playing against, the conditions of the golf course, and maybe even perhaps will change depending on what kind of swing that you're bringing onto the golf course the next day. And lastly, we have the mental aspect of golf. And like all the other pillars, the mental aspect is something that has to be practiced, has to be focused on. But unfortunately, the mental aspect of golf and the mental pillar of sport is usually forgotten and left late, well until it's too late to kind of work on. So when we talk about the mental pillar, we talk about things like what you're focusing on, what you're paying attention to, and other kind of cognitive processes. So when we talk about what exactly is mental performance, right? What do mental performance consultants do and what do we focus on? We like to think about how thoughts, emotions, and your focuses can actually have a very physical impact on the performance of athletes, no matter what sport that they're playing in, right? So most often these things come out in terms of in golf, very common examples are the first tee jitters, right? Why is it that some people seem to, pretty much lose their swing on the way from the range to the first tee? You get things like how some golfers can, start off a round very poorly and really grind really hard and put up a respectable score, while others seem to snowball and put up a really terrible score. Right? And then very lastly, kind of sticking to routines and sticking to practice plans. This is very prominent around kind of New Year's time. People always comes out with a lot of New Year's resolutions, setting new goals. Most of these resolutions are pretty much finished and left to the side by the end of the first or second week, while a very select few are able to really push forward and complete their goals and really stick with their goals for a long period of time. So these are three common examples that I work with in terms of mental performance. We work on how we can overcome things like nerves, how we can really persevere, and how we can stay motivated with our goals. So whenever I work with my athletes on a one-on-one basis, especially in the world of golf, we tend to focus on 9 specific mental skills. Mental skills are techniques and tactics that we work on to increase our ability to perform mentally on the course. So the first being goal setting, right? This is usually what we start with. How do we set proper goals that are motivating, that breed confidence? Next, we have self-awareness, being able to pay attention to yourself, understand what's going on in your own body, and understanding what situations help you succeed and what situations kind of prevent you from succeeding. Then we have what we call positive perspectives. When we talk about mental performance or psychology, very, very often this is the first thing that people think of, right? Most people who work with sports psychology are very positive, but what does positivity actually mean? Is it just being naive, lying to yourself, or is it a little bit something else? Next, we have managing your activation levels. So this is the first tee jitters, the nerves, your first big tournament. How do we manage our nerves to kind of properly perform at the level that we know that we can perform? And then we have something called motivation, right? Very often in sports, failures are a big part in sport. How can some people push forward while other people tend to wilt and kind of give up on their dreams and their goals? Resiliency is kind of building off of a lot of what motivation is, but we've always heard of people who are resilient individuals who seem to overcome setbacks, overcome obstacles very easily. How can we build that and develop that not only in us, but in perhaps people around us as well? Then we have focus, and along with focus comes distraction control. So pretty much this focuses, this is really paying attention to what kind of things that you should be really be looking at when you're golfing. Are there things that you should be avoiding? Are there things that you should be maybe perhaps not really paying attention to quite as much, things that you try to put on the back burner? What should you be focusing on? Some tips and techniques to really switch your focus from one thing to another. Really common in golf, especially in something what we call the pre-shot routine, is imagery. Being able to visualize yourself performing certain movements, performing certain golf shots to really breed some confidence into what you're doing. And then lastly, we have quality practice. What is quality practice? Often people just kind of move through the motions all the time. You see the people who are just beating golf balls on the range over and over again with no really sense of direction. Really sticking to a proper quality practice routine is a big part of mental performance, and including mental practice into that as well. So when we talk about the mental pillar of sport, it's just like all the other pillars, the physical, the technical, and the tactical pillar. The mental pillar is really something that we have to practice on a consistent basis. Very often we leave this to the end, and it's only when things go wrong that we really start paying attention to the mental pillar. So for example, you've been practicing, you've been working on your swing, you've been keeping physically fit, and you've gone over your strategy for the round, but come tournament day or game day, things really start to break down. It's because we haven't really paid attention to that mental aspect of preparation as we've went along. So the mental fitness requires deliberate practice, and we really need it if we want to really perform maximally, really engage in that high quality training, right? Like not going through that same motions over and over again. And then just kind of having an overall healthy mental well-being. If we have a foundation of, mental health and not really having to pay attention to too much, it provides less distractions for when we are on the golf course. So the first thing we have to do is really gain awareness of what mental skills are. We have to try to implement them on a day-to-day basis. First, maybe outside of sport, and then gradually bring them into sport. And then lastly, we have to evaluate all these mental skills and how they're actually helping us, or maybe perhaps they're maybe not helping us. So as we go through the next couple modules, I like to point out some very common themes that are always present in golf. So for example, a very common theme and a very common quality that a lot of elite and high-level golfers possess is a thing called mindfulness. And you might have heard of mindfulness if you've ever done things like yoga or meditation practice, but mindfulness is basically just staying in the present, right? Not letting things kind of distract you that are happening in the future, that might happen, or things that have already happened in the past. It's really staying in the moment, accepting what's happening around you, and being aware of the situation that you're in. Next, we have control, right? All athletes like to be in control, whether it's of their golf swing, of their emotions, of their activation levels, or what they're focusing on. Control is a big quality that a lot of athletes need to focus on, and that a lot of the mental skills will tackle as we go on. Then we have determination, right? Perseverance. All golfers and all athletes are going to experience successes and failures, and probably more failures and setbacks than successes. That's just a natural way. That's just a natural progression of athletics and sports in general. So the best athletes are always those who are able to get up time and time again, refocus, and which leads us to the last one is reframing, right? Because you don't succeed and we're going to experience some failures and setbacks, we have to be able to take away from those failures and setbacks something to learn, something to move forward with, and it will inform our future decisions, right? So these kind of create a more resilient individual. As we go through, the following modules, you're going to notice that all the mental skills that we talk about will tackle one of these things, one of these common themes. So how do we get the most of the modules? The mental game is something that's not really something you can really touch, and really it's difficult to experience, right? So the one thing I would say is always keep an open mind. Some of the exercises might seem a little bit different from what you would usually try, might not make sense, or might not fall in line with what common golf sayings or common sports sayings are like. Might just keep an open mind, experience as much as you can, figure out whether things work right or work or don't work for yourself. I want you to remember that all of you out there, you're all going to be unique individuals. Mental skills work in a very general sense, and they all have very positive effects. But what works well for one person might not necessarily work well for another. This is just kind of like everyone's got their unique golf swing, and while there are basic fundamentals, you kind of have to apply them to every individual in a very unique manner. So just because something works well for friends or your buddies doesn't mean it's going to work well for you, and just because it works well for you doesn't mean it might work well for your friends and buddies out there. So I just want you to really pay attention to what's happening to yourself, right? This comes up a lot in self-awareness. Understand what's working well for you, what's not working well, and we can move on from there, right? Next, you always have to be patient with this. So there are some mental skills might seem to click really quickly. You might see a lot of improvement, you're setting goals, and you instantly become a little bit more motivated. Whereas others, it might take a bit more time for you to really notice any sort of improvements at all. So for example, really working in imagery into your pre-shot routine might not really seem like it's doing much at first, but the more you stick to it, the more you're going to notice some positive effects coming out of it. So be patient. Not all of these are Band-Aid solutions that really improve. You're going to notice improvements right away, but it's worth sticking to. And lastly is stick to the process. So not only will, sometimes you don't notice improvements right away, but you actually feel like you're getting a little bit worse. And I think this is a very common theme in golf as well, where, you're changing your grip or changing your swing, you're instantly not really going to be hitting as many good shots, but you trust your instructor and you know that eventually you're going to come out with a better result, right? So it gets the same with mental fitness and mental skills. At first, it might not feel like it's working. It might feel like it's tedious and actually taking time away from other things that you might be doing. But sticking to the process, you will come out the other end a more mentally fit individual and more ready to play your best golf. So the upcoming modules, so how are we going to navigate through them? The following modules are going to each focus on one specific mental skill. Each skill provides a very unique solution to maybe a specific instance or situation in golf. So you can skip through them if you want, but what I would recommend is you always start off with goal setting and self-awareness, because these two provide a lot of the foundation materials that you're going to need to inform your work in the other mental skills. Working through goal setting and working through self-awareness, you really realize what other mental skills you should be paying attention to, what you need in your golf game, and what you want to get out of it, right? So they really provide the roadmap for the rest of the skills. So I really recommend that you start off with goal setting, start off with self-awareness, and then from there you can kind of pick and choose which modules you go through. Obviously, I recommend going through them all from beginning to end, because some of these mental skills will build off of some of the skills, some of the other ones, some of the little techniques that you learn from other ones. But I understand if you want to maybe really focus on your activation and playing stress-free golf instead of working on imagery, for example. So that's kind of up to you. But again, please start off with goal setting and self-awareness at the very least. So that's kind of the end of the introduction to golf. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, and we'll see you in the upcoming module.